Being inflated is a very dangerous thing in Jungian psychology that they don't really talk much about. It has the capacity to cause a psychosis. It's called Schadenfreude in German, where you take delight in people's failures. Hey guys, I got another dream for you.
I had a dream that I was on a mattress that you can blow to fill it with air, floating on the streets which were underwater. Another guy was in the boat. I think it was his. The boat sank slowly, so we had to get off. Then I sat with some people, and when I walked past the tables, every third person said something nasty to me. In the end, I asked a girl and a guy if those people had a problem with me. The girl said, "To be honest, you're cold, and you don't appreciate the Asian culture."
All right, so that was the dream. We need to add context for it in order to get the associations correct. I would also like to say this is not the original voice. This is an AI generated voice, a text-to-speech voice, mainly because the original text was translated from German, his native tongue, to English. Anyways, to add context to the dream, he is a 27-year-old and has started his own business and actually has started a second business. The first one is doing great. He's at the current stage after, I think, around 5 years now of intense struggle and hard work, has finally reached one of his metrics or his goals, which was of making 100K a month. So he has finally met that goal, which ultimately means that he's making over $1 million a year. That's the context. And the reason why I chose this particular dream is because of its simplicity. If you listen to the dream again, you'll understand why it's so obvious. Because during our consultation, I likened the dream to slapping him on the head because he's not paying attention, because it's so obvious. It's like his unconscious was fed up and was just like, you know what? I'm just going to tell you what the answer is, which is what dreams are supposed to do. It's supposed to reveal to us our unconscious aspects. So the dream or his unconscious was fed up with him and finally just said, you know what? I'm going to just tell you what this dream means. And I'm pretty sure most of you get an intuition of what it means because of the very last sentence. It pretty much tells you what is going on. And you can just skip back to the beginning if you want to hear it again. I think we will break it down, but the ultimate message here, so the part where it says, to be honest, you're cold and you don't appreciate the Asian culture, that says it all. So his unconscious is telling him that he's cold and that he doesn't appreciate the Asian culture. Specifically, a girl is saying this. And again, the dreamer is a man, so that tells you that his unconscious eros principle, or the related aspect in man, his anima, which we've learned in many other videos, is telling him this. So his feminine side is saying that he's cold and he doesn't appreciate Asian culture. What you can take for the meaning of the Asian culture is a different perspective. So like I said in the beginning, he's German. So he's from the West. So he's Western. So the Asian culture is a completely different culture than his own. It's another perspective. Now we have to go back to the beginning of the dream to really understand what that means of the Asian culture being a different perspective. So he had a dream he was on a mattress that you can blow to fill with air, and he's floating on the streets with it. Blowing to fill with air literally means inflation, to inflate. So you can say a part of his personality is being inflated at the moment. And again, the context is important because you're like, okay, what does that mean? Okay, I'm inflated. What does that mean? But in the context of his successes, his recent successes of making over 100K a month, everything starts to feel really good. Everything starts to feel like he's always right, that he's succeeded in business. So then he can become inflated. He becomes airheaded. So the dream is trying to compensate by pulling him back down to earth, saying, you're being inflated right now. It's giving him the diagnosis. Look, this is what's happening to you, and you don't even know it. That's why you're having a dream about it, because dreams only tell you what you don't know. So he's having a dream about being inflated. Then it makes a lot of sense. So due to this inflation, aspect of his personality. The girl says that he's cold and he doesn't appreciate Asian culture. So because he's inflated, he's become closed-minded. Cold-minded, closed-minded people become a bit cold. They don't take anything. They're not empathetic anymore. They don't elicit feedback. They don't listen to feedback. And that's dangerous. Inflation is a very dangerous aspect in psychology. You don't want to be inflated or deflated too much. You want to be just right. So that explains a lot. So due to the inflation, he is unable to see different perspectives, metaphorically represented in the dream as an Asian culture. And you have to think of it this way too, like in the West, he's defined as successful in terms of financial or monetary success, right? With that's how we, for the most part, generalize success, although success is subjective. So he's achieved success in this one track mind, like this one methodology of reaching success. But there are a lot of Asian cultures, a lot of Asian people too, that have also reached a very high level of success as well, but in a completely different perspective. So in a way, it's showing him like you can reach success in two different ways. Like it's not only your way is right, the Western way, but you could have a completely different culture with different values, with different motivations, different information to reach success. It's a completely different perspective, but they both attain the same goal or success. So that's another way of saying that. It's another way of saying that you can open your mind to different ways of thinking and also be successful. It doesn't mean that you only have one way of thinking and that is your definition of success. And so that means everyone around you, their definition of success should be exactly the same. And that can happen with people who are inflated. They think everything that they're doing is correct, everything that they're doing is the best, that they're the best, that no everyone else is a lesser than them. That's the definition of being at the top. You're looking down on other people. That's a bad and dangerous thing to do. But that's essentially what the dream is trying to say. And you can also here you can go deeper into the dream. Although we have the overall message, you can go and say that so the streets are underwater. So the water usually represents in dreams, in Jungian psychology, the unconscious. And the streets could be like the rational way of thinking. Like um, it is also very important to understand the dreamer's personality type because then you can understand how they think consciously. So you could so this dreamer, he's an ENTJ, so he's very rationalistic. He has extroverted thinking as his dominant function in the cognitive function stack of his personality type. So you could say that his mind is very rational, so the streets would represent that rational aspect. And water is completely the opposite. It's free flowing. It's amorphous. There's no shape to it. It can go wherever it likes. That's another way of interpreting the water for this particular dreamer, by the way. But the water would represent the unconscious aspects bubbling up to the surface of his rationalistic environment, his mind, which represent the street. So because he's inflated, the unconscious contents are coming up. It's like a compensation. It's like if you repress something, it's just going to come up even stronger and darker and heavier and more powerful. So if he's leaning way too heavily on his rational mind because of this inflation, because of his successes, because his rational mind has brought him a lot of success, the compensation will take over and try to rebalance him. And that's really what the dream is doing here. The water is flooding to the surface now. And if he doesn't take control of this inflation, it could inundate him. Metaphorically speaking, a tsunami could take over and wipe out the whole city, meaning no more rational minded at that point. So this gives you indications of what could happen if you don't pay attention to your dreams. The city would be flooded with the unconscious contents, which is represented symbolically by the water. But this dream is that your unconscious is a real trickster, and you'll hear that a lot in Jungian psychology, especially through dreams. And then if you have an analyst, their unconscious acts like a trickster sometimes. It can play like these really dumb games. Like it'll make the dream extremely complicated sounding, but the message was on the surface the entire time. And it's a real trickster like that. It can play these really interesting games because the unconscious acts like a separate personality than the ego. The ego is what we use when we say I, like I am so and so. That I is the ego. The unconscious acts like a different personality and can do all these things. It's very powerful, the unconscious. But yeah, so the when I was laughing in the beginning because the his dream was just like so obvious. These dreams don't come often, particularly for him, because we've gone to such a deep level of interpreting his or analyzing his dreams that finally it gave him a very obvious one. And what's really interesting is we've actually been having I have been having trouble interpreting a lot of his dreams, mainly because we've gone to such a deep level in his psychology of interpreting his other dreams. So it's like a game. It's like whenever you interpret a dream correctly, it no longer shows you that same dream because you got the message. The dream only tells you what you don't know. So there's no real need to introduce you to that same motif, same symbol in that dream because you've completed your mission or task for that dream. And so we go to the next level, deeper and deeper. But because we are at such a deep level now, his dreams are getting more abstract and more difficult. We really have to go deep into his history, deep into his psychology to extract the meaning. And sometimes the analysis could take hours of conversation, of really getting to the core of his psychology at that point. And mind you, he does have an ego, and it's healthy to have an ego. I mean, it's essential to have an ego. But what I mean by that is there are things the ego may feel uncomfortable sharing or due to pride or anything like that. This comes up a lot. Even with myself, I will catch myself and say, okay, I'm only human. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to have negative thoughts. I'm going to have destructive thoughts. And there's nothing to be ashamed about. Some of it really is not under your control. These are unconscious contents coming up. So, but the ego tries to like put up a very strong resistance sometimes for particular or certain subjects pertaining to that individual's life. So that makes it even more difficult. So I have to, as the analyst, chip away at that in order to get to the core meaning of his dream and his psychology. So point being is because we've gone so deep and we've been sort of stagnant at this level, metaphorically speaking, I've had so much difficulty interpreting his dreams because they were more and more difficult. And I feel like because our unconscious plays sometimes like a trickster role, like maybe the message is really obvious and I'm just too stupid to understand it at that particular time, or it is really that difficult. And it because he has been resisting maybe some of the questions that I ask, it makes my job a lot harder to interpret. And that often discourages me. It really makes me feel filled with doubt because then I question my capacity as an analyst, like my integrity as an analyst. But then I understand that that's part of the process. I'm not supposed to know everything, and this work is extremely difficult. It's not easy, and it doesn't get any easier. It does get better, but it doesn't get easier. And finally, the unconscious wants you to know these things. And so I think his unconscious understood my doubt. It received my doubt when I was speaking to him. Like it knew that I was feeling sort of low, and finally gave us this dream. And on his first reading it to me, I laughed so hard because I was just like, finally, it's like we unclogged the drain, metaphorically speaking. And I laughed because I was like, okay, your unconscious is literally just telling you to come back down from your inflation. And just on that one sentence, it clicked. He was like, yes, I've been closed minded lately. He's been ignoring the feedback of his peers and his friends because he's inflated. There's nothing to be ashamed about. He was unconscious of it. But now that he knows it, he can correct it. And it's very dangerous because if you are inflated and you don't hear other people's opinion or feedback, you're going to get yourself into a bit of trouble. You might get into accidents in terms of his business where he might not see a loophole, in making a decision and fall down into the abyss of problems. So it's very dangerous, and you must be able, and then there's another aspect of inflation which makes it even more dangerous, is you start to distrust a lot of people, which could even be your best friends, your family. Because you don't know psychology, you won't really know whether or not you can really trust them or not. But he knows now. So, because there are some people that are actually close to you that may actually not want you to succeed in that regard. So, I understand that aspect where you become more distrustful, not because of inflation, but because that is just human nature. People, it's called Schadenfreude in German, where you take delight in people's failures. Like you don't want them to succeed. We all have that. I myself have that. We all have that. But it's once you're aware of it, you can sort of call yourself out on that and realize, wait, that's my friend. If he succeeds, I succeed. And you can sort of correct your thinking, logically speaking, in terms of if someone else benefits, you will vicariously benefit as well. It's not a zero sum game. If the pie gets larger, your portion gets larger. So that's a very healthy way of thinking about things, because then you're going to lift people up instead of bring them down. That's important, and this is just from one dream. You can get all that insight, and I can keep going and keep talking about these things, but you can get all this insight from just a small dream. All this wisdom that may not appear obvious to you when you first read it, but then you start going down the associations and start realizing, whoa, this means something else. And that helps you become more wise, more experienced, and as well as it helps you make better decisions, because now you're like, wait, why would I not want this person to succeed instead of succeed? Because if he succeeds, then I succeed too. If he makes more money, I get paid more money. Or if he succeeds and he makes the world a better place, you benefit from that better place. I mean, that would make a lot more sense than, trying to bring them down and wishing they fail. It's a really sinister thing to do. I wouldn't want that. And the dreams tell me that you should probably think positively, more optimistically, in terms of wanting everyone to succeed. There's also a really cool way of thinking about it. You are the average of your friends. So if your friends succeed and you're part of that friend group, it's more likely you would succeed too, because you're part of the average of your friends. It's important to pick the right friends, to have a good circle of friends around you who lift you up, who promote you, who lift your spirits, who make you feel better about yourself, because you are that average of your friends. It doesn't seem related, but that has to do with inflation as well. Being inflated is a very dangerous thing in Jungian psychology that they don't really talk much about. And one thing that happens to a lot of people who are on the path of individuation in Jungian psychology, which means that you've encountered the self or the center of your psychology, your totality. In other words, it is the psychological manifestation of the God image. When you have that encounter, you go through a massive inflation. And what that does is it has the capacity to cause a psychosis, because the inflation is so great, you're literally up like a balloon, you're up in the air, you're no longer grounded in, which the ground in psychology represents reality. You're so detached from reality, you're in this bubble of inflation. You no longer have any relation to people around you, and you go into a psychosis, and that's very dangerous. So it's part of the analyst's job to help the patient remain grounded. It's very important, because you just don't want to become inflated like that. I mean, the reason why I'm pausing here is because I'm thinking of all the disasters that can occur, including with myself in terms of inflation. Um, Reality will check you all the time. Like, I was going through an inflation one time, and a bird shat on my head just as I was feeling inflated. And my friend was there, and he laughed, and he's like, that definitely brought you down. So now I always have to think back to that moment to bring myself back to reality and remember that I'm a human. I'll make mistakes, I'll have failures, and I have flaws. and I won't make the best decision all the time, that I am to some degree wrong, and I have to just work on being less wrong in the future. So that is the power of dreams, and this is one of the most funniest dreams that I've interpreted to me. And if you have a good contrast, it's very funny. If you have this dream is almost exaggerating its simplicity to me because of the contrast between this dream and the more complicated dream. Anyways, that's all I have. If you're interested in learning more about dreams and psychology, particularly Jungian psychology, which goes into analytical psychology, and typology, which is the precursor to the MBTI, like the personality types. I developed an application that you can download available on the App Store and Play Store, so go ahead and check that out if you're interested. It's a very powerful app that has a lot of information regarding Jungian psychology, and it teaches you how to interpret your dreams just like this. And that's all I have for today. So thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for the next.